Tecumseh Sherman, General-in-Chief, United States Army. Many of you probably came here today to hear stories of our victories in the War of Rebellion, some call the Civil War. We split the rebels in three by seizing Vicksburg and Jackson, then Atlanta, then the March to the Sea, then north through the Carolinas, where we isolated Lee between Grant's army and mine. I love to tell the stories of my great men of the Army of the West, the greatest fighting force there ever was. And if any of you out there today are one of my men, I salute you. But today, my return to Sacramento has prompted a different story. One of 35 years ago, when I was stationed in California as a young lieutenant. Our boat left New York in June of '46, bound for California to fight the Mexican War. We went around the tip of South America. We ran into much bad weather. It took us 190 days to arrive in California. And when we got there, the fighting was over. Kearney had already occupied Los Angeles. I cannot describe my profound disappointment. From age 16, when I entered West Point, I had yearned and trained to show my bravery and skills in battle. Many of my classmates got that chance. There's only one war per generation, and my war had passed me by. But a soldier must do his duty, and an officer must know the terrain so as to defend it, so as to track his enemies. And California was a vast, uncharted wilderness. There's maybe 20,000 Californios and scattered ranches through this huge territory. There were no cities, there were no trade centers. Kearney had to send to Hawaii for supplies and clothing. And so I explored, I took notes, I mapped. We were based in the capital, Monterey. I went south to Los Angeles and marched back 40 men over some dry and dusty and rugged country. I would not have traded that whole area for one county in my green Ohio. And going north was no better. The villages were bleak. San Jose, a string of low adobe huts festooned with drying garlic and peppers. Santa Clara was a dilapidated church surrounded by drying orchards. But the worst was Yerba Buena, a more desolate place I could not imagine. Hurricane winds. The drift sand was so deep our horses could hardly put one foot in front of the other. There's maybe a couple hundred people, a little harbor. The harbor master, Folsom, tried to sell me lots in that godforsaken place. He was buying everything he could. I was insulted that he would think me such a fool. But we know, 3 years later, Yerba Buena was San Francisco and was a city of 30,000 people, and Folsom was one of the wealthiest. So, who was the fool? But I will never understand how the lead city of the Pacific ended up in such a terrible location. I would have picked Benicia. Well, in the spring of '48, a couple of Americans arrived in Monterey with a letter from a man named John Sutter. And Sutter had discovered gold on the American River when he was building a sawmill, and he was requesting that we grant him a section of land so as to keep out squatters. Well, we had no authority to do that, and we laughed because this was 40 miles from the nearest settlement. Who was ever going to bother him? But within weeks, the cry of gold was everywhere, and I was dispatched to investigate. I went through San Francisco, and the town was deserted. Everyone had left for the gold fields. I went from Sutter's Fort up the American River, and the river was lined with miners. The lucky ones were making $1,000 a day. Sometimes they could pick a nugget straight out of the stream. Even the less lucky ones were making $20 or $30 a day when the average wage was $1. So I returned to Monterey, and I suggested that we write a letter to the president of this discovery of gold in California. And I did that, and it was dispatched with an officer going east on leave. And in December of '48, President Polk announced the discovery of gold in California, leading to the California gold rush as a result of my letter. Well, soon there were thousands of people arriving by ship in San Francisco, and they immediately left for the gold fields, including the crews. By 1850, there were 600 ships abandoned in San Francisco Harbor.
Wow. Because
they had no crews. And we had the same problem with the Army. An enlisted man made $7 a month.
Wow.
When a new regiment came in the spring of '49, half of them immediately deserted. So we officers had to go track them down. Well, I knew the terrain best, and I found their camp, and I was able to arrest 22 men in the dark and hold them for several hours till help arrived. Only one of those son of a guns got away. Well, people were arriving, of course, not just by boat, but they were coming in over the mountains as well from the east. Thousands and thousands. And as winter was coming on in '49, the people arriving said there were still thousands out there with failing provisions, dying horses. Well, our commander bought $100,000 worth of food and supplies, and we ordered packed trains of soldiers into the mountains to assist these immigrants, and we were able to get them all out before winter set in. And by doing that, we probably saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. Well, that was California back then, and I can't say I was disappointed to get transferred out of there. I was looking for some place with a little more order and discipline. But I did return to San Francisco for 5 years in the '50s as a civilian. But I always knew that I was a soldier. And when the War of Rebellion came around, I was able to get back into the Army, and I was able to prove to myself and others that I was, in fact, a soldier. Thank you all for coming tonight, and to my brave men of the Army of the West, dismiss!